Red Cow Arcade.
Let's not bury the lead, shall we? Not only have I read, no, I didn't read.
Yeah.
I've listened to the full audiobook of this, but so did EJ.
Yeah, I on 1.7 speed, I listened to it. I downloaded his audiobook off of Audible for free. Using a free trial.
We had some friends who they were like, I have to sign up for a trial for Audible. Every time I ever want an audiobook, this is always an issue where there's a little, everything on Amazon points you to subscribing. And I think a subscription is like $17 a month, but there's this little tiny on the right, you can see like buy with one click and you can just buy the audiobook.
Yeah, you can. I did do the trial because I'm pretty good at canceling trials.
Oh yeah.
So
I guess there's a part of me that feels like I may need to someday reference this audiobook again. may need to go back.
I could have bought it and like written it off on my taxes, but it's a business expense.
The last time we talked about this book, we talked about the intro chapter. We talked about his autism. We talked about his struggles with anxiety and his kind of childhood trauma and his special ed school and stuff. And I think at the time we thought probably we'll do a couple of chapters at a time. No, we crammed it. We're going to give you the big video right now. We're going to go like as in depth, like, and we're going to bury the book here right now.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Thanks for hanging with us. I'll preface this with, before we get into it, like I got a tweet from somebody the other day that was like, why are these douchebags on Red Cow Arcade? Like they're always dunking on Bimmy and, you know, that's not cool in the creator space and stuff. And I kind of like, I ended up talking to the guy for a bit and I was like, because he said like, what, you know, spend all your time making fun of James Rolfe when you could be doing creative things. And I was like, well, I don't know if you've watched any of the videos, but like there's certainly some criticism. It's mostly of his business. And then there's lots of praise. Yeah. It's just talking about a topic. I feel like I have to keep rehashing this. And so I thought, I was like, how come I keep having to rehash this? I'll tell you, I realized it's because the algorithm just feeds people the thumbnail. They just see that there's people being critical of James Rolfe. It doesn't show them the other 300 videos we made that year. Yeah. And so like it just paints a very inaccurate picture of the whole thing.
Yeah. And the amount of time we spend on content, I would probably be like 1% of it is actually James Rolfe, like effort wise.
Yeah. And yeah, sure. All the views come from that. It's true. You got me. I didn't do that.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Fault. And it doesn't help that he continues to be very fascinating that I want to talk about him.
Yeah. Well, so that's something the book there. I had a question going into it, which was, do I need to read this book? And I mean that as a fan, not for this podcast. I mean, like I've watched countless hours of behind the scenes commentaries, personal insights. I mean, I just feel like I already know the guy. And so have you ever read like an autobiography where you ended up being like, oh yeah, I had heard basically all of that. And like, I believe like there was a Kevin Smith book like that where I was like, I already caught all that on podcasts and stuff.
Well, even parts of this autobiography, I would say it is that it goes in that vein where you're like, okay, I could have written this part, you know, because he's so high level and goes through it so quickly. But there's wells that he dunks into that are pretty.
I would
deep.
say that there's a meta layer to it that I had not seen of him up until this point that connects the dots for me anyway to understanding the full person. Like I always knew that he was like a passive personality type. He had a lot of drive for his creative stuff, though, so that's kind of contradictory in some ways. But then through the book, I've learned that he's highly sensitive to stress, and I've learned that his high sensitivity to stress is related to some of his like childhood struggles, and then having a few majorly stressful, impactful life events. Like he carried that and it kind of all does culminate into making the movie, which in some ways it was his ultimate kind of like creative trauma.
Yeah.
And
the movie is definitely one of the creative trauma wells that he falls into in the course of this autobiography.
Yeah.
And the other one being his expulsion to college, temporary suspension.
Yeah. So that's a massive part of this.
He spends a lot. And I think part of that is that he wrote that soon after the experience and saved it and included most of it, it seems like.
So here's how I want to do this.
Okay.
I suspect that there are a lot of people out there who will not read the book, who are interested in knowing what the contents of the book were, and are counting on you and me. I think they trust you and me at this point to recap it in a way that like is equal to, that basically like does the trick. And so I think we could I have notes. I assume you have some notes. I think we can go through it kind of chronologically, but I will say like and I'm sure we talked about it last time. One of the things that surprised me was his whole thing about like, I wrote this on floppy disks when I was a child, my autobiography. And so our instinct was to be like, how are you writing an autobiography about yourself? Like before you had a life? And it now makes sense. It was an autobiography, ladies and gentlemen, about him getting expelled from college. That's what he was writing. He was not writing a memoir about a life in filmmaking. He was writing a memoir about getting expelled from college. And I think he didn't say this. Again, I'm going to fill in a lot of gaps. I think that it was like journaling therapy for him. I think he was so completely stressed by the event that it was like a positive way to kind of work through what he was feeling about the whole thing. And so that's what this book was. And instead of just being like, okay, that's kind of silly, let me just write the book over again, since I think it's worth now that I actually have a massive career that people would be really, interested in.
Yeah, it would be a much smaller part in a book that encompasses more of his life. Instead of like a really in-depth essay about being expelled from school and then some cliff notes about the rest of his life.
Yeah, instead it's like a 7.5 hour audiobook. And I would say that the whole events with like getting expelled from college took up, I don't want to say half of the book, but like, would you say like 40%?
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's not uninteresting. There's I mean, I'm actually glad I went through that journey with him. I was actually I do the rowing machine. So I was rowing while he was going through the stress of getting expelled, and it made me kind of stressed out and keep like working out.
Well, okay. So we already talked about the special ed school. That'll come back, but if you are interested in like our opinions on that, go check out the first. It's called like the intro chapter to A Movie Making Nerd. I thought it was cool that he received a video camera and an NES on the same day. The two like sort of objects that would, and if sometimes he does it in a saccharine kind of overly symbolic way. But I think there were a number of times in the book where he drew cool parallels that I kind of felt like. The day that my parents' marriage ended was the day mine was beginning. For instance, like, oh, that's great. The last time I'd see my parents standing together would be on my wedding day, and that kind of thing. So there's the meme on Cinemassacre Truth of like he made 1 billion films. Like I made 300 films or whatever.
Yes.
Early on in this, he says like I wouldn't call these movies. But then later on, like when he was in community college and stuff, he was telling people like, but I've already made 70 films. So that's definitely in here. Like if you want to laugh about that, it is in here.
And then he talks about like finishing up the Snicks trilogy, and he's like, "This is what George Lucas must have felt." It's like, okay, so hold on.
There's a lot of self-aggrandizement.
And then he's like reading it very seriously and in the audiobook, so it makes it also kind of funny.
He talked about like when he moved into this neighborhood, there was the neighborhood kids showed him a tree that they called Slobby Eyes.
Yes,
which is on brand.
Slobby,
The Screenwave should have bought that thing. But he talks too about there was like this film he was making where the tree ended up getting knocked down, and he wanted to like, it was all about this like cursed tree, and he wanted to film the tree, but like his dad had gotten it removed, and they ended up like taping over it, and he wishes like he had archived it better. And I relate to that for sure. There's a few just completely lost things that I've made, and I do kind of.
Oh yeah.
more.
Yeah, I've made comic books too. I've made things that will never see the light of day, and I relate to all that stuff where he's talking about gathering his friends together, and they're wearing different shirts on different days. He's already thinking about continuity. It's endearing. He spends a lot of time talking about it, but it's endearing.
Actually, on that note, he talks an awful lot about. It's clear that he was very sensitive to the idea that everybody was too busy to help him make his movies, which is of course very ironic. The no time thing now,
yes.
but I've been sensitive to that too, where like you thought you had somebody you could count on, and in reality they were fair weather friends. Or at one point he says something like, of course, looking back on it, the more valuable thing would have been to just enjoy the afternoon with some friends, and the movie should have been secondary, but I was so focused on the film and stuff. And I get what he's saying, but at the same time, I do feel like structuring your play around a project you can all be proud of kind of brings play to a next level as you get older, like that's, I've run into that before too, where like I've had friends that are like, I don't even care if we roll cameras, and I'm like, well, I do.
I do. I want a thing to make.
We came all the way
business.
Out here. There was kind of a long section about the way that he had like the titling software and the titling stuff in the camera and all that. And I was like, yeah, this is not nearly as effective as doing this with video, which he did on Cinemassacre 200.
Yeah. I remember a lot of those stories already from Cinemassacre 200. So,
did you how sad did it sound when he was like, I'm 7 years into this special ed school and there's no girls. Like I've never really talked to a girl before.
Yeah. And there was some tragedy in that. And then when he actually like there was girls around, it's like there might as well not have been, because he didn't know how to interact with them. And
why was he always, there's like a number of stories in this about like, there was some girl I worked with at Walmart and she tried to slob on my knob one night. And I'm like, why? There are all these like very Forrest Gumpy type stories where he's like, I didn't know what was happening.
I can see it, because like, I think some of his awkwardness and like pushing forward with things, it comes off as confidence when it might be just oblivious, So,
or there's like enough confidence to be attractive, enough nerdiness to be charming, and enough disarmament to for a young lady to be like, he's not threatening to me. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of things, but he didn't have the skills to pull it all together, or he's probably trying to be, either clueless or just didn't know how to tie that all together in a way that other people might take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, he said he got he kept calling it Shit Mart. Maybe he thought that he'd have a trademark issue or something. I think you can go ahead and say you worked at a Walmart, but it sounds like he worked at a Walmart. He collected carriages and that sort of thing, and he describes it as like an immensely stressful job. And I'm sure I don't think I've worked retail, but I've worked restaurants, like 3 or 4 restaurants, and especially at that age too, where you're like, I cannot believe this is my life right now.
Yeah, I worked at Ames, and I'm a little bit of an introvert too, and like dealing with a bunch of social interactions every day is like tiring, because especially like he said in the book, like these are a bunch of interactions that are usually like negative, where they're asking for something, their customers are always angry, and then he relates it to later in life when he's the nerd and he has a bunch of like people getting his autograph. It's more positive every interaction. So I totally understand that working at Ames, but retail.
It seemed like it sent him over the cliff of stress, though.
Yeah, it was. Retail was annoying, but I think he puts himself into situations where he gets a lot of anxiety. Or he gets a lot of anxiety in situations, I should say. Yeah.
He obviously has like an anxiety issue. I do think that like, so I got my first summer job when I was 15. My dad drove me to this place called Fred and Ann's, which is long gone. And I liked when he talked about that towards the end. He was like, I remember like how stressed I was at Walmart. That Walmart's gone, the building's gone, not just the people, not just the memory, like the building's gone. That is kind of profound. Like this thing this source of, this like retching gut feeling, you know, it's vanished. But my dad was like, we should get you to work on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays this summer. And you went from like just yesterday, you were just a dreaming kid. You were just a kid. And as far as your future went, the sky was the limit. Like anything you could dream up, you thought maybe that's what I could be. And then like you're 15, 16 and you're like trying to scrub, you know, with one of those like, foil scrubs, like, so not for washing dishes, for washing pots. And so you got to get it very hot for it to unstick, you know, for like the crusts of chowder to unstick from the ring around the pot and scrub that fucker all the way out. And it's got to be gone because you can't be cooking in something that has like old food in it. And
old soapy food.
And like, there's like people around you that are like deep in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. This is their lives. And like, you're just faced with like, is this my life? It's their life, you know? And
no,
faced with reality.
I totally, my first job was Ames, and it was like, oh, now I don't have free time. Like, I don't have, like you said, like, you know, he was saying he would use all his free time to make movies and stuff like that. It was similar, where I would do creative stuff, and then all of a sudden, oh, I have to get a job. I have to do this in all of my free time. That's not school. And yeah, it's, and then you work with lost souls, and you're just like, oh, okay. And people your age that just want to like dick around and drink all the time. And, you know, I was like a naive 16-year-old too. So you're just like, oh geez. Yeah. should I try to fit in with these guys? I don't think so.
I continue to think that filmmaking is like this. You know, we talked about last time, it saved our lives in a lot of ways, or it provided us with all kinds of direction. I mean, for this guy, filmmaking comes along and just does wonders for him. It's the most positive thing that ever could have happened to him. It not only gave him a direction, it not only gave him a passion, it not only gave him a social life, it also gave him like organizational skills. It gave him, you know, which, you know, I would argue he doesn't have the best organizational skills, but he, you know, somebody who might otherwise be scatterbrained or disorganized, like it really, really whipped him into shape.
Definitely.
And he talked at one point, I don't remember what the specific circumstances were, but about some like unsafe filmmaking, you know, like looking back on it, like, why were we being so fucking unsafe? It's funny. That made me reflect on, like, I remember shooting this scene in like a funeral home we had access to. There was no grownups. And like, it was just a bunch of us teens, and we had swords, sharp swords. I think there was a prop gun involved, and like, oh my God. You just think, like, if I was like a 36-year-old Frankie, I walked in on that, I'd be like, shut it down. Like, all of it, put away the cameras. Like, you guys are, and I don't know them personally, but there was a circumstance some years ago at my school where somebody was shooting on a rooftop that didn't have guard. It was kind of like a helipad kind of thing. And they were doing a tracking shot backwards and walked right off the fucking thing. And, I mean, it's just like, young people are just really, really rough with this stuff. And if you're around any young people who are making movies, like make sure to talk to them about this stuff. So I really liked, just while we're still in grade school, or I guess high school, he meets this Kevin Finn character who I've always tried to, he's the co-director of the AVGN movie. And I've always tried to figure out, like, where does this guy slot in? And the book doesn't really help me with it that much. It's like, we've met what it felt like in the book. Like he met him briefly, and he also made movies, and they had vowed to each other they'd make a movie together. And then they kind of split back up again.
I think he does that with all of his collaborators in this book. It's almost like a cameo. He like, oh, I met this person, and then he like doesn't really explain much else about their relationship.
It's strange. Like he has a weird kind of like a lack of reverence for certain individuals, but who are very impactful. But I did like, this took me back. He talked about the first time he did a video project for school. Now, I know you've done video projects for school. And I remember, I hadn't thought about this in so long. Just the feeling of like, you know what? Like, I'm going to bring in a creative video project. I'm going to show it on, those like TVs that were mounted on the wall, like the CRTs that were like mounted up high. By the time you get to like middle school, high school, because like in elementary school, they had to wheel it in. By the time you get to middle school and high school, they actually would mount little TVs, and you would watch stuff a little bit more frequently. And they had a combo VCR. And I remember I just remember slipping the blank VHS tape or the recorded VHS tape into my backpack. And just the knowledge that that thing was in my backpack was like, today's a special day. It's like going on a field trip almost. Like I'm going to show my work today, you know? I was like, I wonder if it was like that for him.
Yeah, and just the audience reaction, him being nervous.
The teacher's pride in it, you know?
Yeah. Especially like, because he did one for a project or something and he wasn't super proud of it and was kind of embarrassed by it. But like everyone was super into it. So he's like, oh, well, maybe I can do something.
So then we get to college. He goes to, was it the Philadelphia Art Symposium or something? I don't know.
Something. Some Philadelphia Arts School.
Yeah. And he goes on for about 2 hours about how his suite mates, he keeps calling them like room pals and room goers or something.
Yeah, room goers. Yeah, which it's a vague, all-encompassing term.
It's so weird to go the room goers.
It's like you had a bunch of squatters in there.
I was like, are they homeless? Like room goers, room doers. But he just describes Animal House. He's like, I lived in this suite of just anarchists, of these guys that were like masochistic, you know, like determined to get in trouble, lighting fires on a regular basis, doing drugs flagrantly. If they were asked to like work in the dining hall, they smashed the plates, you know, just one of them was just throwing trash out the window,
lighting trash on fire. It's out. I mean, I'm sure he's condensing a ton of bad behavior into, much like how he edited all the bad behavior into one VHS tape. He's condensing a lot of events. He must be into one long tirade. And
the way he kept talking about like the dean and stuff, it did feel very like dramatized. It felt like Animal House. Like,
yeah, it did. It felt unreal. Like I never interacted with my dean in my college. Like I didn't even know who they were.
We had RAs. You know, we had like other students that were like,
hey, you shouldn't have a hot plate in your room.
Yeah, exactly. Take down those Christmas lights. But he, like his first like brush with almost getting in trouble was he like took a hit off of a bong, after like, and he really, I believe him, but he really describes himself as like a real like, aw shucks guys. I come from a special ed school. Leave me alone, fellas. Kind of a vibe. And they're like, come on, James. He never like describes him like, maybe it's true too, but like it feels like nobody ever at any point bullied him. Everybody was very generous to him, gave him the benefit of the doubt, wanted him to join in the fun, you know?
Yeah. And well, the fact is he doesn't really stop to describe people too much. You know, you get kind of like, even like I said, the collaborators, but even these room goers, it's like I don't really have a distinct personality with each of them. Sometimes he points one out, but yeah. They seem like a cloud of chaos in his life, and that's all I really get out of it.
And just to be clear, this is the section of, like, even though it's sort of interesting, this is the section of the book that if I had one major critique of the book, it's that like in this section, I'm just kind of feeling like I didn't really come here for the college roommate stories. Like I'm sitting there thinking like, didn't he used to make like homemade haunted houses in his shed and stuff? And they were like these elaborate, incredible. And I was like, whatever happened? Like maybe talk to me a little bit more about like why you're making haunted houses. And
he mentioned it, didn't he? But
just kind of briefly. Like, and I would make
bunch of just like most of the thing. Like even when he gets to angry video game nerds, like, oh, and then I started making angry video game nerds, and it got really popular. Anyway,
it's so fucked up. I did write down, you know, because we had the benefit of listening to the audiobook. So that meant that we didn't get to catch all of the typos or whatever, which by the way, I think, it's, you know, you take 22 years to publish a book. It probably shouldn't have so many typos, but at the same time, when it's self-published, isn't it kind of par for the course? Like, aren't you kind of getting yourself into that a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, I'm cutting this creator some slack, right?
Yeah. It's like when you go to, you see an indie film, you're going to see some rough edges.
Exactly. But I did write down every time I heard an interesting pronunciation of a word, I wrote it down.
Nice.
I'd like to present that to the audience now. Spontaneity. Spontaneity.
Spontaneity.
Colleague.
Mm-hmm.
Not colleague. Colleague.
Colleague.
I don't know why. Confiscated. A little extra N in there. Confiscated. This one was throughout the whole book, and it appeared in different forms. But what if we got caught? What about it? For some reason, when he would emphasize the word "what" as "what," like W-A-H-T, like he's flipped the A and the H. What if? Marvel's "What If."
I want to see that. Where he's
Disney Plus, where we're going to be asking the question, "What if?"
It's got a big bald head, shaved. It's like in the place between universes.
Thanks for coming back to the Angry Video Game Nerd. Inshore ants, not insurance. Inshore ants.
Insurance. Yeah.
Hadn't eaten anything.
Eden.
So really, anytime like aspirating the T, pronouncing a T with a D, and superfluous N's and M's. That pretty much sums it up.
Yes.
Mountain.
Eden.
Spontaneity. No, I don't think he ever said Wolfman, though. Not once. So, okay.
Oh, yeah, because he does talk about the fountain, and he calls it a fountain.
Yes, I almost got that one, too. A fountain. A fountain.
There's another mispronunciation which I caught. I can't remember it though.
They're all good. They're all worth your time.
The audiobook I think is really worth your time.
Yeah. So okay, so all this chaos in the dorm room takes up an awful lot of the book. So much so, like it like kind of pulls the, because I actually do think that I was trying to like poke holes in it, and I was like, nah, I think narratively it's pretty much structured. You know, some parts go by faster than you would want them to, and this goes by way too slow. That'd be my major critique. It's just kind of the narrative flow of the thing. He doesn't provide the kind of weight that you would think would be appropriate given the circumstances and given why the reader is here in the first place. But I think it's all a consequence of he was writing a book about getting expelled. And so that's what you're reading.
And so it was fresh in his mind. I think he put all the book together, rushed it together, put all the other stuff together. Like, I think he gave it probably to an editor, and it felt like the editor probably was like, hey, maybe we should, because it feels like when he's reading it that it feels still feels raw to him, but I don't think it is. Like, I think in this part of his life he probably diminishes that event, but the way it's written, it feels raw and fresh. And then there's a part where it feels like it was written afterwards, where it was like, oh, that was like many years ago, and I wrote that many years ago, and I've learned a lot of lessons, so yada yada yada. And so it feels like that was tacked on at like maybe as some notes from the editor, because somebody did edit this. At the beginning he's like, copy editing by Kieran. Booga, 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 booga. That would be great if a caveman did this thing. It's so easy to copy edit. A caveman could do it. So Kieran's in the fucking Geico commercials. He missed his calling. So okay, here's what y'all need to know instead of reading the book. He had these chaotic roommates. He then went on break before he went on break for summer, he decided that he wanted to make a tribute video about their experiences in this dorm room. Now, this is his first year at this college, so he's not taking production courses yet. He's looking forward to production courses. Instead, he's taking they called it like, first year was called like fundamentals or something. So it's all his prereqs. Yeah. So he's spending all his time on prereqs, and he shoots this, a collection of like every time they rip down a ceiling tile or destroy a door frame or whatever it is they're doing, he's capturing it on film. And that's what he's complicit in. He claims he had nothing to do with any of the actual vandalism by his own hand, with the exception, in terms of like drug use, he took the one hit off the bong and that was kind of it. But he filmed it. And then because he crafts narratives, right? Like I get it. He interviews all the friends.
he gets them saying like, fuck this school. And they're stupid here. Burn it down. They're never going to catch us. They're saying all this kind of, overconfident 18-year-old stuff. And then he films himself saying some of the same stuff along the, and he's cutting it to like, you've got to fight for our right to party and heavy metal music. And so anyway, he goes, he becomes like he works at, I think at a movie theater over the summer, completely forgets about all of it. He's looking forward to his new year. He gets an apartment in Philadelphia again. So he's going to live off campus, I think it was. And then he gets
Kyle. He gets the apartment with Kyle Justin.
So he moves in with Kyle Justin. That he becomes his like roommate over the summer. And Kyle Justin, one of my major takeaways from the book is like this guy was fundamental to James's life.
Yeah, and he's the one who's described like the most in the book, I would say. Yeah. And so he has positive memories, thouts about Kyle.
Yeah, nothing but good memories.
Nothing but good memories.
Yeah, he like Kyle. Kyle was a very good friend to James, I would say, based on what I read. But he gets a certified letter from the dean that says you're expelled. We have undeniable evidence of your that you were complicit in horrific vandalism and disregard for our rules, and they all get expelled. And then, yeah, he's just like bereft. He's like in a daze. He's gonna puke. I've been there with this sort of thing too, and I like that dread that like maybe I'll wake up from this and it won't have been happening or whatever. Yeah, because
the dean got a hold of his tape that he made, so he's basically the author of his own demise there, making that tape.
So filmmaking, the very thing that did so many positive things in his life is really and he had concerned, again, I really relate. He had concerned himself so much with the comic timing and with the edit and and then all of a sudden he's like, I crafted the perfect incriminating piece, because there's no way anybody would have watched all the raw footage. I cut it together and said, look, we did it,
Yeah. He was kind of like playing it up in his interview too. So he's like, I did it too. And we'll never get caught.
So much so that apparently this tape was so effective that like you didn't have to, like, a little bit of media literacy might have made somebody go like, well, some of this might be exaggerated for comic effect or something. But if there was obvious evidence of people destroying parts of the building and stuff, then whatever. So it's at like, so he told his grandpa, and then he told his parents, and it sounds to me like, his parents he described as extremely supportive of him and have always been wonderful to him. And it sounds like they like really like passed out on, they fainted on the couch too. And I think I get the impression,
fainting on the couch.
I get the impression that the whole Rolfe family didn't deal with this in the most constructive possible way. It felt a little, it sounds like they eventually got there, but it sounds like they kind of like contributed to this kind of catastrophization,
Yeah. I think, it seems like James is a very emotional guy, like internally at least.
Yes.
Because he always talks about emotions like taking over and being overcome with emotions and
like, I broke a lamp in front of April, and I'm so sorry to April for breaking that lamp.
Yeah, so it must be in the family as well. I'm sure that fainting on the couch is thing.
I bet they're all a little bit spectrumy. That's kind of the impression that I got. It was like, it's like a whole, with the exception of the sister, who's probably like, fuck you, weirdos.
I love sports.
Yeah, the sister is like this hottie. It's really into
sports and being popular at school.
So they all catastrophized, but then they kind of dug in and... and he did a great job of explaining like this thing had like all this downstream effects. Like my sister's car insurance was impacted by this because I was a student, and just like it cost everybody money, it cost everybody consequences. But the letter said you could appeal it, so they crafted an appeal, and they said, okay, fine, you're suspended for a year. So then he had to spend a year thinking about what he did. He went to a community college and took some classes where he kind of felt like he was above it all. Where there was, some people that were kind of unkind to him while making some movies, but he describes the, and I saw it, reposted a lot, But he describes this moment where like he felt, I guess he had like suicidal ideation is probably the best way to describe. I wouldn't say like it didn't seem to me like he was like ready to take it all, but you know, I think we've all had those moments where we're like, okay, I have no idea how to solve this problem, and I kind of wish I just wasn't alive. You know, there's at least that moment of like, is there any way to like sleep this one off? You know?
Yeah, magically can it be fixed, please?
Yeah. Like, do I really have to be alive anyway? It's kind of just a matter of circumstance that I'm here on this planet. You know, can I just take myself away? You know, people will be sad, but for how long? You know,
for how long?
Kind of go through some of those thoughts. And it sounds like he went through that. And he describes a fairly awkward scene where he's at the beach and he kind of lays his, I shouldn't laugh, I really shouldn't, but he kind of lays his face like into the water for a and says, actually, no, I shouldn't do this.
Yeah, he lays down a shallow pool and he gives up. But then his body...
Where they're like, no.
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly. But then his body takes over and he's like, no, I want to live. And then he like runs and finds that teacher to write him a note to the school. And
so he crafts this kind of triumphant moment where he's like, is it quit or is it game over? Yeah. So I didn't kill myself.
Yeah.
I only laugh, people, because I am not convinced he was going to kill himself that day. I think that he was like feeling very defeated, so I get that, but and he was young. He's a young guy, you know, and I believe, like, I'm sure a lot of kind of like teen suicides and stuff like it's all a matter of like they just lack perspective. Yeah. Like whatever it is that their problem is just. And
I'm sure he wrote that section when he was like 19. So.
Yeah. So I encourage you to remove it. You know, when you're like 75, like he is now. But anyway, Kyle Justin counseled him the whole summer and was like a level-headed, didn't catastrophize, was like, you can get over this, you know, and like really, and like, yeah, introduced him to I don't know if he introduced him to music, but he was very encouraging of his creative life. It sounds like he was a great friend.
Yeah. He was always like, you know, introducing him to girls and women and being like, oh, she's into you, and like being supportive and being like encouraging. It's like,
what a guy. Dude, and did I get it right that he introduced him to April, his wife?
I believe so. It was I was confused by that section as well. Yeah. So, I do remember a line where he thanks Justin for.
Yeah. But he says something about, I met her online too. Like on MySpace or something.
Well, he says through Instant Messenger, I think, or at least he was talking to women on Instant Messenger. Well. Technically, mine too. Yeah. We're of a certain age where we all were trolling Instant Messenger.
I mean, I met her at school, of course, but I only had the courage to talk to her on AIM, basically.
Yeah, me too. Like
slide into DM.
We didn't talk at all in high school, and then in college, I like Instant Messenger. AIM caused a lot of relationships, I think, for that generation.
What a tool. And it left, I don't know if this crossed your mind, but it left me thinking like this thing that was, again, I think he does a great job. To me, once he gets expelled, then it becomes a lot more interesting, where he's like, I had to relive this extremely stressful set of circumstances over and over and over again, because all summer long I had to keep re-explaining it to people who would never expect this of me, or people who respected me.
Because he would go to the college where all of his, you know, people in his school went, the local college. Local jobs, he would have to explain it to people. So yeah,
and he surprised me when he said like. He ended up talking to one of the kids. I think the worst one, the one that was like, you know, just hell bent on getting kicked out of there. And he said something like, "Hey James, like, I don't blame you for what happened. You know, I just wanted to get kicked out anyway." And that this lifted, you know, a guilt off of James's shoulder. And I thought two things. One was like, it wouldn't be a guilt off my shoulders. I wouldn't have felt guilty in the first place. I would have thought, you were the fucker who insisted on destroying things nonstop just so you would get kicked out of school. And now I'm like, yeah, I of course filmed it and edited a wonderful documentary about how great it was. but you're the one who did it, you know? But then the other thing was, he said over and over and over again, I have no idea how the tape got leaked, because it was a private tape. And then he said that he became friends with the elderly dean. Ultimately, when he got back into school, he worked for the dean. And I guess he never asked. I don't know. Like, I needed a payoff. I'm like, well, how did they get the tape?
Yeah. I guess he was never curious enough to ask.
Oh, come on.
Any of
Get
his
over yourself
friends.
and ask. We all want to, if you're going to write a book about it.
Yeah. I would ask each one of those friends if he sent that tape. And I'd be like, hey.
I'd show up with a gun. So
like, who did it? It was you, wasn't it? Bang. And you shoot one of their legs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or at least a foot.
Yeah. In Minecraft, guys. In Minecraft.
In Minecraft. In Vector Man for Sega Genesis. Yeah, that whole thing surprised me that he never got to the bottom of it. Oh, and then the other thing that surprised me about that whole thing was for a guy who's, and again, I relate completely, for a guy who goes to great lengths to preserve all of his work, no matter how amateurish, no matter how irrelevant to today, he let that tape degrade. He said, I don't know if he just let it rot in the sun or something, but
yeah, I think it was too shameful. I think like it would be like ash in his mouth because
yeah,
he gets those wells of stress, and I don't think he wants to, I think it would be too toxic for him.
I told my wife about that, and she was like, that makes sense. She's like, that's what I would do. And I was like, not me. I'd keep it.
I'd keep it.
I mean, because I the one good thing that could come of it is I could tell the story someday.
Yes, exactly.
And then I'd have a tape to show you, and I could, unless I guess like if I felt like if I felt deep shame, if I was like, I really I fucked up so bad, and I so wish I hadn't, and I'm, it's still fresh in my mind. Yeah, then because the worst decisions I've ever made in my life, I probably wouldn't want a tape of them to show everybody. But I just feel like there's a statute of limitations on these things where, by the way, I was 15, so let's laugh at it now. I don't know. Yeah. I think I would keep it.
Yeah, but who knows? He might have like destroyed it when he was too young and emotional. So. Oh,
you know what else? So I'm thinking about the parent. Ultimately, the parents were plugged in and tried to help him, and they wanted to. They kind of turned their attention from hating on him for doing this to hating on the school for suspending him. But I was thinking, like, if you're a parent and you've got this son, you've got this troubled kid, this kid who struggled with girls, struggled with people, struggled with education, struggled with concentration, struggles with like going outside. And he finally finds his calling, so much so that he enrolls in college. Like, what a miracle, right? And then he has a big fuck up in college. Something goes very wrong socially. That's kind of what happened here. You got to be very careful with how you handle that situation, because you could traumatize that kid away from ever doing anything social ever again. And it feels like he was on like, because what do you do? What do you do to punish him? Like, be like, okay, your life's over.
Yeah.
It's I would say it's more important to kind of re-inspire him from that state than like bring him down, than punish him all that much.
That's tough because it's like the boomer mentality, man. I don't think it's in their nature to do that. It's more, grounding and taking things away. And
there's a certain kind of kid who needs that, like I would say the pompous kid needs to be, like right-sized. But the kid who was this close to working in Walmart the rest of his life, like careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like don't traumatize him into, like, cause this could be it for him. He could be like, you know what? Talking to humans was the problem. It sounds like they threaded that needle, but I don't know. Sounds hairy. I don't envy them for that for sure. Yeah. So then he ends up going back to film school after all. And he said like he didn't like that. He didn't like that film made him splice film. I wrote that down for some reason. What was he saying? He had to actually cut the film and he didn't like that? Oh, he wanted to go digital?
Yeah, I think he said he liked the computers more, the computer software, but they only had like a certain amount of computers that could actually run the software, and it was like in was it the photography lab or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, around that time, that would have been... No.
Yeah, digital really ignited. He mentioned Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere by name, and I
can see that for sure. Like, because if it's like 2002, computers barely run that shit.
No,
but at a school like that, they probably would have those may have been $3,000 workstations. And so you just have your hand on something that can run software that nothing else can run. And then, does he meet April? Does he meet Mike? Does he meet Bootsy? Does any of the AVGN stuff happen without the expulsion?
No.
Nope.
No.
The timeline, the butterfly effect.
Oh yeah.
So this is where you have to accept God's providence. This is where
in a way, would we even be like making content as well? Maybe not. Like I was inspired by James Rolfe, so who knows? You wouldn't even be listening to us.
It's wild. I mean, James Rolfe has such a success story, and it's such an unlikely success story. It's so based exactly on the right content at the right time with the right humor. And it just doesn't happen unless, getting expelled was very, very important for the rest of his life, one way or another. Yeah. So maybe in that sense, of course I don't think he pointed that out in the book.
No. Strangely, you got to connect a lot of dots for him, This
is why we're writing our kind of meta audiobook here. This is like we're going to help him out. So then I said, much like the expulsion video, James takes things that are around him and makes stories and videos out of them. Yeah, there's like a whole section where, I don't know, he's just kind of dramatizing a lot of stuff. He talks about the DVX 100, which is what I shot my first feature on. Is like the big first 24p kind of affordable camera. I think it costs like $4,000. Is that right? Maybe $3,000. Did you ever use a Panasonic DVX 100?
Yeah. Yes.
That was a big deal camera, but you didn't shoot it on widescreen. It was still standard def.
Yeah.
Or 4:3. Yeah. He continues on about like people couldn't make time for him. And he spends a lot, more evidence that he's really affected by stress. He spends a ton of time on bad jobs. He's like, and this job was very sad for me. And this was very sad for me.
Yeah. Like the one where these describe the boss as like Donald Trump or something, and and it sounded like he did a lot of work for that guy, although it sounds like crazy where he's like they didn't have scripts, so they were just like cutting together like B-roll, and then like he would just make something up or find manuals. And
he worked for he made safety videos for like a construction company, right? They would make them for construction companies. Yeah. Construction companies were their clients, I guess.
Yes.
It reminded me a little bit of like, sometimes like when you work a job at like a small town private company, you end up, your boss is the owner and the owner's insane. Yeah. I remember my brother-in-law, Nina's brother, used to work for this shipyard down the street from us. And he was like working with fiberglass all the time. He'd get it in his hands, and the guy was a drunk and, it was, probably doing illegal things nonstop, you're on the payroll and you don't get taxed. This is a lot of jobs like that.
Yeah. And it seems like he was like a power worker. So he was probably doing, 90% of the work. And so this guy was lucky to have him and was like begging him to stay.
Right.
I've worked at startups where they don't really pay you. And it's a little like that, because to start a startup, you have to be insane in a different way, except you're younger and insane. And it's a similar things where like, we can't pay you, but we need you here.
Yeah, like what is this? Like, are we family now? All right, so here's a meme that has come from the book. When the book was released, Cinemassacre Truth said, "Oh, this will be good. We'll get a lot of memes." Well, this is one that we can take to the bank. For some reason, he calls Mike Matei just Matei the whole book. I don't know why.
He's briefly mentioned in this book.
There's not another Mike really in the book that is like that he needs to distinguish Mike Matei from.
Does he call him Matei? Does he? I've never really watched James and Mike Mondays, so I don't know if he was like, "Hey, Matei, pass the controller, Matei."
Yeah. Hey, come on, Matei. Be like if I wrote a book and like I was talking about like my collaborations with EJ. For some reason, the whole time I'm calling him Massa. Really
problematic
weird.
One.
Yeah. Yes. Well, there's that. So that's strange, but yeah, further evidence. I've said it for a long time, and he doesn't say it nearly enough. But like Mike Matei made his whole thing happen.
Yeah,
he brought over all those classic retro games. He's the one laughing when James is saying shitload of fuck, and and Bootsy too. It sounds to me like Bootsy was like on the ground floor of this thing too, and then and the fact that Mike is the one who got it online. And then people miss this too. Years later, Mike's the one who's like, all right, you've really kind of like sank your company with this like movie, this feature film. Like, how about I'll do these like Let's Plays, and that'll like keep this company afloat. And Mike is it, man. Mike's the one that made all the, like, I know the guy is nuts and loves McDonald's or whatever, and he's got a huge dong, but like, he's the guy, he really is the one with the business sense, it would seem.
Yeah.
More so than Big Ryan. Big Dong Matei.
Yeah, he came up. I think he came up with a spark that was angry video game nerd and brought it through. And then kept it like sort of monetizable, like consistently. And actually, that did that shock you as much as it did me? So he goes, okay, so I made a few AVGNs. Then we got it on YouTube. Then I started to amass an audience, but whatever. My personal life was continuing during all that time. He says, I didn't make any money off of any AVGN episode until episode 20. I was like, all right, that sounds about real because YouTube had nothing. Yeah, it didn't have monetization.
But they were on Screw Attack, and I always thought that was how he was able to start monetizing. He goes, Screw Attack said, hey, post on our website, but he said that they offered no money.
Yeah, well, Screw Attack didn't really offer many of the creators money because they had a bunch of creators on there, including.
So what were they offering?
Captain S. Well, at the time, let's say like Captain S was kind of concurrent. From Dylan the Night Owl's video, he said that they offered Captain S for like season 2. I think it was like $15,000 for the year. So, I mean, you can't live off $15,000.
Right.
So, and you'd have to do like full production and do a job and then make $15,000. So it makes sense.
James didn't say it was relatively low money. He said it was no money. They said, come host on our site and we won't pay you. I just don't understand. Yeah.
Well, that was before even Captain S, I think. That was when Screw Attack was like just starting up. And then... But like, I would assume that later, when they were more successful, they would offer money. But I'm
just confused. Like, if you upload it to YouTube, even infant YouTube with no monetization, and you had really high view counts, why would you go post it over on somebody else's website for no money? I just don't understand. Like, what would have?
I think maybe just traction. Maybe they, Stuttering Craig was a really good salesman. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the end it worked out. I think miraculously though, because it doesn't seem like a prudent decision to me, but I do remember back in those days, I would go over to that website. He would post like a trailer on YouTube. So it was YouTube that I was connected into Screw Attack, and then I would go to Screw Attack. I'd watch it.
Yeah. I watched all the initial ones on or maybe it was Game Trailers.
Yeah. I think I think Screw Attack was like a subsidiary of Game Trailers or something Game Trailers. And I remember, and I would watch some of the Stuttering Craig videos because I was already there at the website. So it'd be like, number 5. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He had countdowns and shit.
Yeah. And then he said he started to learn, he was asked to do some appearances as the nerd, and he learned that he really needs to be scripted as, he can't, he can't speak off the cuff really.
Can't improvise as the nerd.
He does talk a bit about like what it's like to be like kind of internet famous, which I thought was good to include in the book. Some personal insights on that. He says he can't get unfamous. I think he struggles with it for sure. Like, he said, he's like, I'm the right amount of famous, like, where I get recognized when I go out, but I don't get mobbed, and I guess that makes sense.
He's both anonymous, but gets recognized enough. You get recognized more often than I do. That's for sure.
I bet every time he goes out in a reasonable amount of public, there's at least one hello. You know, he's pretty famous on the internet.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
But so he also talks about how he admits that he's just not that good at the business side of this. That he's always been a creative. He's never been a business guy. And I feel like I always actually appreciated that about him in a way, because he would make these kind of unlikely decisions. He would make these kind of creative first, business second kind of decisions, which ultimately I think improved his brand and improved his reputation and made him credible and stuff, and helped his longevity instead of cashing in on stuff. But I feel like when you and I have been the most critical of him, it's been when he has had the least business sense. Like,
yeah, or like he basically takes a step back where he's not even having creative input. All of the creative input is with, you know, Screenwave or whatever. Right.
Now this shocked me. And I'd love to get your take on this. I've heard him say this before, but man, I really swallowed it this time. A standard AVGN episode, says he, takes 40 hours to produce, 40 to 80 hours to produce. And the ones like Rob the Robot and Mega Man take 120 to 130 hours to produce. I've seen these videos. How is this so? Look, I get it. There's some like Adobe Premiere motion tracking in these videos. Yeah. I understand.
Well, he's got to drill into some desks in between.
What the fuck? He's like, the Rob the Robot took 104. I'm like, did you see that video? I mean, it's okay. He's like, I understand there was a green screen and there was some like explosions you ripped off of YouTube and stuff, but like, I just finished, an hour and 20-minute 2-part holiday special for our channel, and I probably was editing at least an hour a night for 3 weeks, and so that comes out to like 25 to 30 hours, and it was just like, it was nose to the grindstone, like heavy editing, and I'm going like, I don't see it. I think he's inefficient. I don't
think he's efficient. I don't think he's efficient. Maybe does he still have 2 VCRs? I don't know.
Well, okay. But, here we know he's inefficient. Oh, well, obviously we've watched the BTS video, but many years ago he made this video I loved because he went like step by step through the entire process of making an AVGN episode. But I remember he described like he wanted to use, what was it, like sound effects from the game synced at different times, and so he would isolate sound effects from the game recording and he would record them onto DVDs, and it kind of was like a precursor to that BTS video where he sort of like pitches to us a process that we all need to just trust is the best possible way to do this.
This is how I figured it out, and this must be the best way.
I swear, like there was it ushered in a generation of YouTubers who were like, I'm going to make my content a little funnier and a little more streamlined.
Yeah. And I do wonder, like, because he was talking about how like Mike Batey sets him up with some of that stuff, and it's like, do they just like feed off their bad habits on each other or something?
Oh, I'm sure.
Like Mike is like a little more technical, but I don't know, still kind of inefficient.
Totally. I mean, yeah. Although he at least is the guy who's like, I know what an EverDrive is, and I can set that up. He says something as well, like well, there's kind of a whole section where he goes full BTS, full behind the scenes video, where he's like, it takes me forever to make videos. The internet is mean. The criticism of me makes no sense ever. Fame is hard. I wish I could make more movies. I just can't. Sorry. He kind of does this whole pity party thing. And there's like maybe 4 or 5 times in the book where he's like, most people understand my situation. Unfortunately, some people, he keeps being like, some people are cruel. That's just how it goes. Cruelty. And I'm like, maybe. Yes.
You know what my favorite parts of the book are?
What?
It's when he tries to make like the story just told into a lesson.
Yeah.
Where he like a very like simplistic lessons like, and so that teacher taught me that, you know, sometimes they can be bad teachers, but you can still learn something. And it's like, all right.
They're like, all that fucking rambling led into that.
He does it a lot in the book.
Oh yeah, stay out of my booze.
and every time it makes me laugh because like he starts to do like the lesson learned tone of voice, and it's really it cracked me up every time.
That's really funny. And by speaking of booze, he does. It seems like, especially with Mate, he did become something of a drunk at some point.
Yeah, no,
right?
Yeah. So it wasn't like, you know, being the drunk angry nerd is not, you know, unfounded. He was.
It colors the Rolling Rock element to it in a slightly different light. It's like maybe you were kind of day drinking an awful lot in that period of your life. Like, man, maybe there's more overlap with this character you insist that he is. He says something like, "I don't understand why these people who take all this time to criticize me, couldn't they just do something creative and beautiful like I do?" And I'm like, well, what do? You fucking criticize games.
Yeah. Those developers are crying in their into their pillows because of you.
He takes all this time to review our games and say how shitty E.T. is when he could be doing something beautiful, like making his own game.
Although he was in the AVGN movie.
Yeah. So when he laid out the pitch for the AVGN movie, I have to say, and so we're coming in on the home stretch here, but we got a lot to say about the AVGN movie. At least I do.
Yeah, that was another well, like the wells that he dips of anxiety he dips into.
Yeah, this gets fascinating.
This is another one where he kind of like breezes through like the creation of AVGN. Once he gets to the movie, he dips in a little bit more.
Yeah, he actually like commits some, and you know what? Like I do kind of appreciate, because to me it's like, I don't need to know how you made the Arnold Schwarzenegger game episode. I don't need to know how you made the Rob the Robot episode. Like you've covered all that. So I'm more interested in like, what was it like to become the AVGN? What was it like to me, the rare opportunity a book gives you is you can tell me how you felt. So you can really talk to me about like what the emotions were. And so I think he generally does a good job of that in the book. But you're right. Like the AVGN movie was ripe for this. Like he theoretically he could write a whole book just about that one movie experience. I would have preferred that book, honestly, over the Animal House book that we got. But the pitch about like, okay, it's a lost video game that is about aliens that is infamous for being the worst game of all time. So it fits the AVGN mold. And it's dumped near Roswell, and so it's a conspiracy theory, and that will sort of be the catalyst for the. To me, I'm like, that's a pretty good pitch. Like, there's a lot that like works about that. You know, that really, as far as a concept for like how do we adapt a silly web series into a feature length film, I'm like, that's great. Like, go with it. Like, make it great. You know, and turn it into your big monster movie. Turn it into use it as a jumping off point to make something truly fun. You know, but there are 3 enormous problems. I'll sum them up and then we'll get into it. The script took 3 years to write, 2007 to 2010. That is too long to write a script like that.
Yes. Right.
I mean, how are you supposed to like hold any perspective on what this thing is for those 3 years?
Yeah. I didn't get. He said he went back and forth with the other guy, Kevin. But yeah, I don't know. They did that for 3 years.
And I'm dubious of Kevin's involvement in the entire thing. And we'll get into that too. The post-production in particular, I'm like, where the fuck was Kevin? Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Right. So the script was terrible. I mean, to me, that's like the number one problem with the movie itself is like the script doesn't hold together. The script reads like a first draft at best. I mean, there's stuff in it that doesn't belong. Like, I don't know. He never explained like, and this is why I added Cooper and Mindy, you know, to the, like, he never explains like, what the fuck is all this shit? Like why does the nerd like puke on the girl? Why is he like a sex object in the movie? Why does he work at GameStop? Like to me, like that GameStop stuff felt like a fleeting idea that they had early on, or like maybe he works at a game store. And then if you actually had worked the script harder, you would have realized way far in advance, like, obviously this is superfluous to the plot and needs to be removed. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, the production was completely nerfed by virtue of the fact that it was shot in Los Angeles. And so it ended up like it costing way more than it had value on the screen.
Yeah.
And
and the way they like did the money and the taxes. LLC.
Yeah, we'll get into all that. But I would say that it was run amateurishly. It was run, obviously, but it was run like it was mismanaged. The principal photography was mismanaged. Like I would say like hugely. And then problem number 3, he then spends 3 years finishing the movie after principal photography in what he describes as extended post-production, but it's really not post-production. He's shooting a ton of the movie, like in his basement and shit. So this $300,000+ principal photography gets augmented. I don't know, like there's like a lot more movie after that he makes in his basement, like a web video for 3 years.
Yeah. And he uses his own money to do it. And, gets Mike Matei to film in his backyard doing stuff. So yeah.
If anybody was wondering why this thing sucks, those are the broad strokes. It's like you took way too long to write the script and you really didn't. And he took so long because he said he was working on like primary AVGNs, right? And then a mismanaged principal photography where they didn't get what they needed to get, frankly. like all that stuff with Death Moxix.
That was filmed after.
It was filmed after. Yeah, I mean, they didn't do it during principal, and it's like a huge part of the movie. And then it was made like a web video at best. Okay, so rewind.
The Death Moxix thing, he said he came up with that with Mike Matei, like when they're just like goofing around, and it makes no sense, and it's whatever. That makes total. That really brought it together for me. That it's just an inside joke that doesn't work. Yeah.
So here's a tidbit for everybody who doesn't know. They ran their Indiegogo campaign toward the end of the year before they could start expending any of the money. And so if you do that, it means you can't write anything off. And so that means that 100% of the donations are taxable, like income to the LLC that they created. So they lose 30% of everything everybody donated like that. So off of, let's say 30,000, 300,000, you lose a fucking 30% of it.
Yeah. Like Indiegogo takes a cut. PayPal takes a cut. And he's signing posters at the state, so it's like there's like just this huge kind of like upfront. And I'm not really blaming him all that much for the tax thing. It's just that it seems it's like right off the bat before anybody's made any movie, the thing is already starting to hurt. Yeah.
And like it's really unfortunate because it like fans' real dollars are flying out the door. And let this be a lesson to everybody that like raw dollar bills don't a movie make, Yeah. You actually have to manage those dollars well. So they
let that be a lesson to you. So I learned
just because. So yeah, I guess conduct your Indiegogo when you're ready to start spending, basically, and do it before the end of the calendar year.
Yes.
He has been accused by his detractors of pocketing donation money to buy a house. I don't know where this rumor comes from, and I don't buy it. Unless I was presented with very compelling evidence. It really nothing. And he tries to address it. He doesn't say the thing about the house, but he says like some people think I pocketed the money. No, it went into the LLC and somebody else managed it and stuff.
Yeah, and the principal photography in California describes with all the cuts from taxes, PayPal, and Indiegogo. As soon as you're starting to film in LA and you get union actors, it's gonna.
I want to say like, oh, he wasted your money.
He did. I mean, he did waste it.
But
it didn't go to his house.
It wasn't nearly as awesome as that.
You almost wish you did go to his house.
Instead, it just went to the tax man, and it went to like permits and like unions. It just like flew out the window. But what I do believe is he goes like, oh, actually, my personal income was impacted because I couldn't be making the kind of web videos I was making for a while, and basically it was kind of like it was like taking time off. And I'm like, yeah, because how much of a salary, like out of a $300,000. Like, what's he taking home from that? Probably, if he wants to make the best possible movie, he's not taking 70,000 home,
No.
So he didn't talk about any of that. But when he says like my personal finances were impacted by the decision to make the movie, I believe it. It seems obvious to me. And again, I really like that about James. Like he makes the creative decision first, but God help him when he has to make the business decisions. And then there's a really, really corny section where he's like, I got out there, I got to Hollywood, man. And I went to the sign. It was like I was Rocky the night before the big fight with Creed. And I stared at that Hollywood sign and I said, yeah, I'm taking on Hollywood. I'm like, you're not taking on Hollywood. Hollywood's taking on you. Hollywood's fucking you in the ass.
Yeah. We're taking you for a ride.
I mean, I just don't know why you would take a non-Hollywood film and be like, we must shoot it. And he even says later on, he's like, and I hope that this paves the way for other people. I'm like, what? like quite the contrary. Like, if anything, it's a model for like, don't be doing that. Don't be, like Kevin Smith paved the way. He shot in a convenience store in New Jersey,
Yeah. And he was talking about how it's always like raining and the weather's bad there. Let's just make the narrative around that, you can do it. You can do it. You don't have to make an Arizona desert or a California desert video.
He had a lot of good stories about location scouting, catastrophic, like, there was like a place with like a major sewage issue. One thing that leapt out to me that I don't think I knew or hadn't thought about was it because it was a union production. Again, I have to say, why the hell is this? Like, do not shoot the AVGN movie as a union production if you can help it. If it's a labor of love, it's a passion project. Like, get other people who are passionate, and then you can work around the clock on this thing and get this thing done. Yeah,
that's what we do. We're not union. We're filming the Box Mat Christmas special.
It was a labor of love, a passion project. That's why we moved to Los Angeles and made it a union production and paid every tax we could. What the hell are you doing? I just really like cosplaying in Los Angeles, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
This has always been a major critique of mine. My whole creative life is like, don't be worrying about how you look while you're making the movie. Like, the movie is all that matters. Like, just make the movie. And he said something like that. It was a revelation for him as a child when he learned that the only thing that matters is what's on the screen. And that, like, oh, that's like, that scopes it down. That's something I can really control. I like that. And I think he forgot that lesson. I think he should have reiterated some corny ass lesson about that here.
I think he should have. Well, I think that goes to his core identity was that he's a filmmaker, and we when we're in film school, they want you to go out to LA, they want you to spend some time there. Some of them want you to end up there. So there is that pressure. So if filmmaking's your identity, you're like, oh, of course, Hollywood, Los Angeles.
In as much as you assume that it requires. That it's required to have a career in film, maybe. Yeah.
And legitimacy, maybe.
But this guy paved a different path. This guy, I remember thinking that he was the first person I was ever like, oh. Like,
yeah, so it's weird that he went back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he needed to cosplay. But it was a good story when he was like, we just needed a patch of fucking sand where we could shoot like some like games getting buried in a landfill. And the only there's deserts everywhere, but they're outside of LA proper. And if we shoot outside of LA proper, then to get one pickup of some sand requires lodging of anybody who's there involved in it. And we're not going to spend the budget on lodging to shoot like a pickup essentially. I think it's stuff like that kind of led them to shooting tons of the pickups after the fact. And that's why like half the movie looks like total jank, But then like other parts of the movie look pretty sweet. Like they're like that car chase in the van, like where they're knocking into the boxes and stuff like that. Some of that stuff looks pretty cool. And then it cuts to some terrible fucking green screen thing where Cooper is like in his room with like a boom mic. I mean, it just, well, we'll get there. Another interesting piece of the story I had not heard before. They thought that they were going to be able to use the phrase ET or use the branding of ET, the real game, all the way up until the day before shooting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. And then, because he's like, oh, I didn't know I had to talk to Spielberg to use ET.
I should have gotten back on AOL and talked to him. Garo fan. My only thing about that is, again, like, I don't know, you use the real titles and the real game art on your web series all the time. Like, and you're going to self-promote and self-distribute this film just like you self-distribute your web series. Like, stop with the legit stuff. just do it. Just whatever.
I'm sure he doesn't ask.
I promise.
I'm sure every time he sold one of those DVDs, he didn't ask any of those game makers permission to use any of the logos, anything.
No, Screw Attack for years, and now Screenwave. Big Ryan's not sweating it. He's sweating just because of the weight. It's like one of those guys. He should wear like a sweatband, you know? Like the fat guys who wear athletic wear. So this is where, like, you start to really hear about time constraints. Like, this is where the time of James Rolfe kicks in, and where, like, this high sensitivity to stress, like, he's just feeling it. And you do get the impression that he was kind of like emotionally and mentally paralyzed throughout most of the production. I'd love to hear Kevin Finn's side of this story. You know, like was James useful to you? There's one part where he was like, I was so fucking stressed, like I couldn't. We're all sitting there ready to shoot me, and I couldn't talk.
Yeah,
like, I'm supposed to like say lines.
He had the shakes. He had the vapors. He was overwhelmed.
Yeah, he had the shits because the whole production was ass. It just turns into the actual nerd. I got so mad I beat up Bugs Bunny. I'm sorry, April. Sorry. You had to see that.
I just like the idea he just has to apologize to April like every other page.
Every time he does anything untoward, he's like, I'm sorry, April.
Sorry, April.
April.
And then I clogged the toilet. Sorry, April.
I'm sorry, April. I'm sorry. Most people are very supportive of my love for my wife. Unfortunately, some people on the internet think I have to apologize to her for clogging the toilet and beating up Bugs Bunny. Yeah. This is like a James AI.
We fed James into an AI.
We've written a Hallmark Christmas movie starring James Rolfe with an AI.
And this is what it gave us.
My husband is Bones. He starts and then he tells I thought, a pretty captivating story about a trouble employee. And I was actually surprised he went into quite as much detail as he did, because he like with the room goers and all that, he went to great lengths to de-identify people and keep things anonymous. And of course he never identifies the guy, but it's
he's a room goer of this film.
Yeah. Let's just call him Room Goer 5 of the AVGN movie. But apparently he had, to make a long story short, an irresponsible, violent a guy that they entrusted. Well, it's really their fault. I mean, like, did you vet this fucking guy? I mean, but they gave him a lot of budget so much so that when it became obvious that he needed to be fired and that he was causing massive problems on set, they didn't know how to do it because they didn't know how to like reclaim their own resources. Basically, like they were all wrapped up in this guy. And to James's credit, he's like, I'm telling the story because I don't want you to make the same mistake, and don't hire idiots. But he also told a really strange story about like they went to like an industry professional or somebody they thought was an industry professional who turned out to be kind of like a mobster who was like,
yeah, he's like, I'll get your stuff back. I'll break his legs.
Yeah, I'll throw him in the back of the nerd van and crash into some boxes.
Luckily, we didn't take his offer. I'm sorry, April.
For one fleeting moment, I considered hiring the mob. I'm sorry, April. And I'm sorry, Matei. And then, like no insights on Cooper or any of that shit. And he says he likes the movie. And he said he's like, you know, there's not, we're really happy with the runtime. You know, it's just under 2 hours.
I think it really moves.
Tight as a drum. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. That movie has there's like some zombie carnival sequence for no reason. There's like
saggy ass movie.
It is a saggy ass movie. He then has his children. His wife has you know, a pretty difficult birthing process. He does when she's going through what she went through. His daughter ended up having like an injured arm that was fully recovered. But ironically, basically this "I'm sorry, April" joke, he says that like at some point, like he looked at April and was like, "I'm so sorry." And I was thinking about that, and I was like, because like we also had a little bit of a not as tough of a time as he had, but we had a little bit of a tough time with our child, where Nina's heart rate climbed, like, you know, to kind of like
our first child, we had kind of a troubled one too.
Yeah. Okay. So here we are, a couple dads. Do you think that it would be best for your wife if you had held her hand and said, "I'm so sorry," when she was in the middle of that peril? Or do you think it would be a better idea to tell her everything's fine and everything's going to be okay? And like, I'm right here and things are good. I don't think like catastrophizing with her. Well,
I think that from what it seems like, they both catastrophize with each other.
Yeah, just bring it down, guys. You know,
because like it seems like he catastrophizes a bit and stresses about stuff, and she like over prepares, but still seems like is underprepared. So like, I think it's just their relationship that it's a little anxiety filled and haphazard and drama filled.
I definitely get that impression. But I just the bit with him being like, and I looked at her and I said, "I'm so sorry," because like nothing all that bad had happened quite yet, and he's already going like, "Oh my God, we're all dead." You know?
Just euthanize April. We're done.
I know a beach we can go to.
I know a shallow pool.
The water is this high. If we just stick our faces in it for a few hours,
we can give up.
We can give up together. I don't know, man. But I'm very glad that he has his kids. It sounds like he's got an awesome situation. It sounds like he's made to be a dad. He loves being a dad. So I love being a dad too. So like, love it. More of that. I get it. But what happened was he was in the middle of this 3-year arduous, ridiculous post-production process when he had his child. I think the way he describes it is like he just wanted to fucking can this movie. He wanted to get out of it. He wanted to sell it off and get out and go hang with his kids. And he was stuck, and he was like really traumatized by how stuck he was. But then he's like, so like it was 12 to 16 hour days daily, nonstop on post-production for months. And then he's like, and I'm like, okay, what are you doing on the movie? Because I know what the movie looks like, and I know what the shots look like. And he's like, I farmed him out to volunteers. So volunteers. So the budget, to me, that $300,000, that 30% of it was taken right off the top. Wouldn't you think that digital VFX would be one of the major things that like you would be spending that on?
Yes.
Sounds to me like there was almost no VFX budget, and that it was all volunteer based.
Yeah, it was all done and thrown into the Hollywood money pit.
I think every dime of that thing was spent towards stupid shit like taxes.
Yeah, I think so. And then it was finished in the basement with the green screen.
Oh my God.
And some people who knew After Effects that he knew were happy enough to work on AVG.
Yeah, it's all like After Effects type stuff. So then he goes like, and then meanwhile, you know, and I'm also wondering, by the way, okay, so if you're just farming it out to volunteers, what the hell is the 12 to 16 hours? Like, what the hell are you working on? Aren't you just waiting for it? Like, they come back, right? And you plug them in. You can go out and sled with the kid while you're waiting on those shots. Can you? It's 3 years you're talking about. You're not talking about like it's due in June. You know?
Yeah.
I'm confused.
I know. Well, man, I just thought about how like efficient you were when you were doing Having Fun Up There when you filmed in a week. And then I remember like, you know, talking to, casually, and then you're like, oh, hey, do you want to see a cut of it? And I was like, It was like November. The
movie's done.
The movie's done, and you're like, hey, here's an color corrected. The longest part was waiting for Will to color correct it.
Yeah.
And
it drove me crazy, by the way.
And because it was done for a long time, and then the color correction was a huge waiting period. I remember that.
Yeah. I think the only explanation is he just didn't really want to finish this thing. I really do think that's the explanation. He was like, I hate working on this movie. Otherwise, why would you take 3 fucking years?
It did seem like he resented it at a certain point. And then when it was out, he came back around. He's like, oh, it's cool. We made our money back. It's sweet. But
thank God. We made our tax money back.
But I think he did resent it and wanted to drown himself in a shallow pool.
He said the movie was an old dream that overstayed its welcome. So that's a very sad concept to me. That you wouldn't want to see that thing, because something I've often said is I've talked to creatives in my day who have been like, yeah, to be honest with you, I don't love all the hard work that goes into it. I love having made the thing, but everything up to that is kind of painful. And James says, he's like, maybe this is why people don't actually do it, because it's a big pain in the ass. And I would posit that the only way to do it is to learn how to love the hard work of it.
Yeah.
You sort of have to learn and it sounds like at times in his life, he was there. He was he kind of embraced the obsessive compulsive aspects of filmmaking and stuff, but not during this time. He wanted to quit and go hang out with his family. And that brings us to kind of Screenwave era, where he's like, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to quit filmmaking and go hang out with my family. I mean, that really is the best explanation for what we ended up seeing after the movie was done. Because people would be like, oh, the movie broke him. And they kind of attributed it to because it wasn't well received or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that probably factored into it. But, where he felt like ultimately the value prop of the movie wasn't really there. But I think it was more I don't ever want to work that hard on something that's not related to my family ever again. That's more the decision he made.
Yeah, that seems very much what he did. And because from this book, it seems like the process traumatized him more than the product itself, which he seems proud of. Yeah,
but exactly. Well said. Yeah, right. Okay, but Kevin, they're like, and meanwhile, Kevin was hard at work on the music and sound. Well, the music we know, a fucking celebrity who probably had, talking about no time. Bear McCreary had no time for your shitty movie, and he made time. And it's one of the best things about the movie, because it's actually done by a professional. But other than that, they're and then he did, Kevin worked on the mix. Now, my guess would be that Kevin took some budget and brought it to a mix house and got it done properly. While, again, more dissonance in the production. Okay, a mix house did a beautiful mix of the film while James was shooting Cooper on a green screen in his, it's these, you kind of, one of the things about filmmaking is it all kind of has to blend together to create the illusion of something cohesive. But where the fuck was this Kevin guy for 3 years? Does he not have any interest in getting this thing done? Would he not want to try to see if he could, I just feel did he in fact co-direct this film?
I don't really know what his credits are after this or before, so I don't know what.
I think he worked in
how much of a real professional is.
I think he worked as a reality show guy or something.
I see.
And so he had some connections. I mean, his top credit is AVGN on IMDb. Let's see. Yeah, he was the producer on a bunch of stuff, shorts, mostly shorts.
Okay.
I swear he worked on some reality shows at some point. We're going back to 20. Okay, yeah. Reality Bites Back. He was a story producer on MasterChef USA. He was a story producer on The Biggest Loser. Yeah. Duck Dynasty, story producer on Duck Dynasty. On Bring It. Yeah, he worked in the industry until the AVGN movie, and then he was kicked out. He took on Hollywood.
Flew too close to the sun.
I talked about Help Pave the Way. He said at one point, now this resonated with me. He goes, I make movies because it's a mental distraction for when things are bad. That's a quote from the book. It's a mental distraction for when things are bad. Is that how you feel about filmmaking?
No. I mean, it can be therapeutic, but yeah.
But a mental distraction? Like I'll be avoidant. Like, I don't know. I feel like the therapy of storytelling, the therapy of art is like you kind of integrate your life into it, right? You're not you're not blocking out life, I don't think. Maybe you watch movies to block out life, but
yeah, I mean he did especially when he was like talking about COVID, he was talking about how like, oh, everything's so awful, and he just could. It seems like he catastrophizes a lot.
Yeah,
and I think it does distract him from making these things. Does distract him from those thoughts and feelings.
Well, these are the kinds of revelations that reading the book kind of gave me, where I never thought of him as like he's like, oh, maybe he's like the filmmaking is really like avoidant behavior or something. And then finally, he does end the book talking about Rex Viper. He talks about how playing live was incredibly fulfilling and great. And it kind of brought me back to like, wow, like he started off as like a guy on the spectrum who didn't know how to interact with people playing live shows, whether they're bad or not. And, his whole career in a sense has been him overcoming himself, which is in that respect, I can't help but come back to like, all right, well, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. April.
Sorry. He's got beautiful family. He's got he's happy with it.
And thank God he got expelled, right? Because otherwise none of it happens. He never gets trapped in the AVGN movie hell.
Yeah.
Well, I do wonder, like, if he doesn't meet Mike Matei, or as he's lovingly known, Matei, does what becomes of James? Does he work at Wawa? What becomes of him?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's if up to that point he was still trying to be a filmmaker. He's still making stuff, so I think he would probably be in those kind of like wedding videographer type jobs. He would, stuff like I do. Marketing videos.
Be like a video professional. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what I do. I make a good living. I like it. So,
well, that was it, man. I think that if you're a fan of James Rolfe, especially a longtime fan, I do think that this will give you an inside look. If you think that that our insights are unfounded or something, I'd like to hear it, because we're interpreting to some degree, but I think we nailed it. But I actually did enjoy listening to it. It was 7.5. Just one more stat. It was 7.5 hours, and he starts talking about AVGN when there was about 2.5 hours left. Up to that point, there's no AVGN.
It's fast forward from there, where it slows down a little for the AVGN movie and the birth story, and then he wraps up the last 3 years really fast.
Yeah. Did you like the book? Like, maybe I should ask it that way.
Yeah, I liked it. It was entertaining. Like, yeah, it's like I said, it's fascinating. This man is fascinating. I will not stop being fascinated. He, sparked my interest in making videos for online, being bootstrappy like that. And so just to get to know his psychology and to really work at it, and with my mind coming to terms with things, it's you can't beat it. You can't beat this experience.
He talks about some car accidents he got in. Those really stressed him out.
Right.
Jobs stress him out. Car accidents stress him out. Expulsion stresses him out. Making movies stresses him out. Having kids stresses him out. I feel you, James. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I would have liked a little bit more filmmaking in his filmmaking book.
Right.
You do have some filmmaking in this filmmaking book. But I think if you're a fan, definitely check it out. It'll give you kind of more insight, and I commend him for he was, I remember I worried that he would kind of promote the book as being like a vulnerable look into his life, and then it wouldn't actually be all that vulnerable. I think it was pretty fucking vulnerable.
Yeah, no, I do.
Talking about pissing his pants and stuff when he was a kid.
Yeah, the balloons popping and being scared. Yeah.
I think it was pretty vulnerable, and I mean, he talks about the gory details of the birth and stuff. I mean, he takes it there. If you want to know about him, you know?
You want to know every single trauma? It's in there.
But if you want to know anything about Mike Matei or why Cooper is in that movie, you're not going to hear it.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.